everyone, and welcome to another show here on The Remedy. I'm your host, Pastor D. I'm delighted to be with you once more on this beautiful, beautiful Saturday. Today, we have a very interesting show that I think you're all going to like. Here's the question: when it comes to the moral line, what is too much and what is not enough? The ladies who are here with me, if I were to ask you, have you ever been slut shamed for dressing too provocatively, or for the way you dress in general, in the name of Jesus and Black respectability? So, what is your take on Black woman purity? So, this and so much more on The Remedy. Let's go. There you go. Hello, 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 everyone.
Hi.
How's everybody doing?
Good. How
Yeah.
are you?
Yeah. Um, so today we're gonna talk about Black woman purity
Or the respectability
or
politics of
respectability.
yeah.
Um, and so I'm surrounded by nothing but ladies today.
Mhm.
Um, I don't want to say females because
Thank
if
you.
I do say that, it's gonna be a. So let me begin with just that. Why is it not a good idea when men or anybody to refer to women or to refer to the ladies as females? Well, what is it about using it and the way it's used? I remember, I'm not going to say whom, but there was this football player who was being interviewed, and she was asking him about the root, and he mentioned, it's funny that females are talking about route, um, but he used the word females and he got slapped for
Dragged.
for using that term. So, if you don't mind me asking, where do we even begin that conversation?
I think the part of it that's um most serious, I think, is the fact that it's kind of reductive to just our reproductive organs. Like we're not just female, we're female humans, and we already have a term for that. Like we don't call men males. Like that's never a thing. And oftentimes females gets put next to a whole bunch of different negative identifiers as well. So the connotation of it has just been like dragged down like the more that people use it.
And I don't want to say I feel like certain contexts, I understand why someone would say female, like, oh yeah, like male and female. Usually when they use them together, no one will bat an eye because it's just like, yeah, they're using it for a different type of purpose. But whenever I'm around specifically male, but well, men that say, oh, like, oh, she a female, like she a dog, like they always drag it, and I'm like, what is this? It just made the term like leave a bad taste in my mouth because when I was younger, I never really cared. No one ever used it that way around me.
Yeah.
Mm. So, if I were to use it, for example, I'm traveling and I got on the plane and I met the pilot, and I'm sharing the experience with my wife, and I say, "Man, I met this female pilot today." Is that the way to use it? Is that still considered female bashing?
No,
I don't
I
think.
wouldn't
Would you say
use
you
that.
I
met
think
a
I think
male
it's really.
pilot?
I'm sorry.
Would you say you met a male pilot? You say I met the pilot was a man. So why not use
Yeah,
both?
that's what I'm
Use
asking, because
yeah.
for me, um by saying a female pilot, I'm letting her know that it wasn't the norm, not necessarily, oh, if she was female or she was a woman, and a negative kind of way. I guess I'm asking because a lot of times men, we get ourselves in trouble for using the terminology in a way that maybe the way it's perceived, it's worse than what it is, if you know what I mean.
Hmm.
I think for me, I have a 23-year-old young lady, young woman. She is extremely feminist. So a lot of time I run things by her because I personally never encountered the female in terms of being derogatory. It was interesting when when I started looking into the show, and I have a science background, so male, female, tick in a box. That's what we do. But in terms of, I think Melody or Wendy mentioned something about this female as or whatever. I don't know if it's a generational thing. I've never encountered that, and I personally don't have a problem if someone say, "Oh, this female such and such," or "this male such and such." I don't see it as an issue. I've actually brought it up to my 23-year-old. Like I said, she's extremely feminist, and she said, "Mom, that's one of those things that I personally, even though being extremely feminist, I don't think it's an issue." So for me, again, I've never seen it used in a derogatory thing. It's an educational thing for me. So as a female, I don't take offense in it. I don't think it's ever been said to me in an offensive manner.
Okay.
Well, that's fair. But diving deep into the topic, I think when you're a Black woman, there's a very thin margin of error that you've been allowed. Um, and obviously, like the world is full of nuance, but when it comes to Black women, we're often the exception of the rule. Um, and I think that we've been like reduced to a set of stereotypes and unmet standards, and somehow like historically, I think the weight of the whole community has kind of been put on our backs. Um, and I like when we talked about this before, I think my passion kind of came off as a generational thing, but really I think it's pain because it's something that I think we've all experienced to some level. Um, and it's like agonizing to hear different excuses for abuse that Black women face daily. And so, because this is a Christian show, I kind of wanted to start off the discussion talking about Jesus Christ. So, how do we as Christians remedy the fact that we care so much about what Jesus preached and how he lived, um, when he was kind to and befriended Mary Magdalene, um, but we're so comfortable with the abuse of Black women who don't fit our standard of respectability. So I wanted to turn that question to the panel.
But can we define what some of those standards of respectability are? I think it's hard to define if we don't know what those definitions are.
Well, I mean, I think we kind of have an idea, like people who are not as I don't even want to say moral, but girls who are comfortable showing off their bodies, girls who have like unmarried sex, like things like that, like girls that we would consider an SLUT or like those kind of behaviors. Like we're very comfortable letting them be trashed on the internet, give excuses for their treatment by men, but Jesus Christ was friends with Mary Magdalene not because he wanted her to change, but because he saw her as a person. So I just want to know how do we remedy these two facts?
Well, I don't know if you can remedy them. On one hand, we have standard. Um, as a Christian, we have standard in which we hope that the congregation or those who call themselves Christian will live by. So the standard are set high, I have to say. Um, Even though they are set high, there are still leeways, and I think the problem is not necessarily the standard that are set. I think the problem is how do we treat each other when we don't meet those standards. Um, I usually say this: we are all working together, and this life. We are all working toward the goal of becoming the best version of ourselves. Um, but where I am in my journey with God may not necessarily be where you are in your journey. So what may be what I may consider, for example, or someone may walk into my church and some people may look at her or look at that person and say, "Oh my goodness, look at the way she dressed," because that's their first impression of that person. Me, on the other hand, I look at her and wonder what's happening in her life that brought her to the church today. So it's we both look at the same person, but we both have different perspective about the reality of that person. I think it's important, um, and I say this very often. It's important before we pass judgment on anyone that we get to know the person, we get to know their reality, we get to know what's happening in their lives, becoming friends with them, if any, before you can even dissect why the person is dressing this way or that way. But again, that's not the norm. Most people don't have the time or the mindset to wait that long. They look at you, you come into the church day one, they have their perspective. Day two, they already pull you to the side and say, listen, you can't come to church looking like this. Perhaps you should wear a dress that is longer, or this or that. I mean, listen, and no one is exempt. If you remember the story, even if you're a pastor's wife, I remember Cynthia gave that example very clearly. This is a pastor's wife, and yet she get pulled to the side by a church member to say you should dress this way or you should dress that way. So no one is exempt from that at all. Not even the pastor's wife. So what do you guys think? I mean, to me, it's a very important question. Welcome, Woody.
Hi
Welcome.
guys, sorry.
It's all
I was
right.
I was having technical issues.
This is a producer, by the way. Those of us who are watching, this is the producer of the show. So, we got your back. Don't worry about it. So,
Thank
what
you.
do you guys think of the question?
Um, I just find it very interesting how people love to just view like Jesus was, he loved everyone. We should all do the same. And then they find the time to comment on someone else's post, like, oh, why is she wearing this? Or they send it to their friends, like, oh, she's wearing that. Like, she's for the streets. That's a very popular term. I just find it interesting that you can go to church, say, we should love everyone, let's praise God, we need to follow in Jesus' footsteps. But during the weekdays, you find the time, energy, and patience to argue with everybody and their mom in the comments about what someone else is wearing or what they're choosing to do. I just, interesting. That's how I find it.
Yeah, and oftentimes, oh, sorry, go ahead, Cynthia.
Oh, go ahead. I'll wait.
And oftentimes, like, um, you were talking about how, like, you were saying that sometimes people in church are trying to do it for the betterment of the community and for that person. But oftentimes, it's to another person's detriment that these things are being addressed. Like, it's to shame them and to bring them down. So not only you feel better about yourself because you're more morally correct or in better moral standing, um, you get to feel powerful over that person because in your mind you're better than them because of a clip you see of them on the internet.
Mm-hmm. Cynthia?
I was gonna say sometimes when people attack you or they make like a negative comment, it's not a reflection of the person per se, but it's more how they feel about themselves. A lot of time members, especially in the church, in the religious realm, they will come for a young lady who's coming to the church and they forget where God took them from because nobody's perfect. The reason why one is where they at is because they had to build a relationship with God, or even God took them from this pit and brought them there, and they don't have mercy, the same grace and mercy God gave them, and they don't want to share it with others. And then by critiquing a younger person or someone who's not in the church, they feel good about themselves, like, oh yeah, woe is me because I used to do that, I don't do that anymore. But they forget the grace and the mercy. So although I may not like how one's dress, but if I if I know them, if they're my friend, I could pull them aside, because it's how you approach someone. If you're not approaching in a judgmental way, like, hey, listen, I understand you're free to wear whatever, but there's a time, there's a place for everything. Because if you're coming to church, you're not gonna dress like you're going to the club. Because if you're going to a court of law, you're not gonna dress like you're going to, because there's a place. Because some people say, well, come as you are. Yeah, really comes out as you are. The Holy Spirit will lead you. But if you're going in front of a judge, you're gonna dress a certain way so the judge can have compassion and mercy. So whatever the reason why you're there, the way you dress reflect, how you want the judge to perceive you. So why not do the same? It's not a judgment on anyone, but it's just sometimes people say that, and then it's just, to me, it's a contradiction of what they're saying. I know, Rudy, you.
I didn't say anything.
No, no,
I,
no.
I'm listening.
Yes, ma'am.
Um, and Cynthia, you took a lot of what I was saying, what I was going to say in terms of standards are there and they will be put for a reason. You need protocols for pretty much everything. But within every field, we do see that standards are changing. We're evolving in our thinking, and it's going to change. The way we used to think 40 years ago, pretty much in every field, that's not how we're thinking. We're thinking more relaxed. However, Cynthia, I have to say, I was going to say, would you go to a job interview in the corporate world the same way you would go to a club? That's not true. However, you did mention something about it's not judging somebody, but I will put somebody aside. It's a very blurry line because it is judging. If you have to pull somebody aside, you're judging them. That's the bottom line. If they can't come into a church and wear whatever they want to wear and everybody accept them, and you even have to pull them aside and say, hey, have you considered this? We're judging them. But the truth of the matter is there will always be criticism in this world. There's criticism based on economy. There's criticism based on anything. We can try to get better as we are evolving, but there's always gonna be a line that is supposed to be acceptable. And even within the Bible, I think Melody or Wendy said something about Jesus and Magdalene, but then I can also go back to the Bible and Proverbs where we talk about, virtuous woman. So there's always so many areas of gray, and you will always find one person seeing it one way, one person seeing it another way. But at the end of the day, it's judging. We're judging no matter what.
So you brought virtuous woman. So let's go there. All
Wait,
right.
who hasn't commented? And I'm scared of that.
Wendy is listening so far. She's getting her animation ready. Um, standard. I guess that's what we kind of looking at right now. So far from the discussion. Um, Pat, you mentioned virtuous woman, and I remember in the chat room I sent a text wanting to know when you think of virtuous woman or virtuous, yeah, woman, what comes to mind? What do you see? Again, I'm asking because I think even when I say the word virtuous woman, it may vary from one person to another. Uh, I was reading an article in which the author described virtuous woman in a way that I never thought of. When I find it, I'll come back to you guys. But I want to ask, when you think of the word virtuous woman, what comes to mind? Do you see the opposite of a Jezebel, and you see the Virgin Mary? I'm giving you two opposites right now. But even when I use the word Jezebel, it's interesting how people assume Jezebel um, was somewhat a loose woman. When you take the time to really study the word, you realize there was no such thing. She did no such thing. Yet in the Bible, that's how she was considered. When, especially when you go to Revelation, that's how she was considered. So, what is this idea of a virtuous woman? What makes a woman virtuous? If a woman is sexually active, does it mean she's not virtuous? If
Yeah.
if a woman is walking on her own and she doesn't have a husband, does that mean she's not a virtuous woman? If a woman, I mean, please help me out. I want to know, what is the modern virtuous woman? What does she look like?
Well, I think you should maybe define what the the virtuous woman was before, and maybe look into what we're thinking about, modern wise, and see whether or not that definition has changed, has evolved. For me, a virtuous woman within a biblical sense is an exemplary person, usually someone with kids, with husband. Religion is a big thing, following
Mm-hmm,
everything to the T. That's usually the concept of a virtual woman. But to
mm-hmm.
be honest with you as well, we have seen within the church and within places, just because the person is playing that role, and it seems the perception of it is ideal, doesn't mean it's not a facade either.
Mm.
So that's for another show altogether. So the perception that we have of that person as well, you know, matters, because
Yeah,
a lot of the time they're playing that role, and sometimes they are doing everything the way that it's supposed to be. But we've seen a lot of time that a lot of it is facade.
mm-hmm.
And it's not any better than the Jezebel, the so-called Jezebel that decide to display it out there and let everybody see it. I would say I would prefer knowing that person that display it than thinking about that virtuous woman that's playing the game and making everybody think, hey, I'm following the rules, when literally you playing a facade. So there's so many ways around this.
What are virtues?
Ladies, have you ever been slut shamed for the way you dress?
Yes.
All the time.
Yes. But what
It,
are
Wait, my little twins, I don't see that.
well,
We did.
I go to school every day and people are constantly like, your mom let you out the house? And I'm like, yeah. And she told me I look good when I left. Like, it's a constant thing. Going back to the question, I don't really have an idea of a virtuous woman. When I hear the word virtue, I'm like, oh, someone who has their own ideals. Usually that involves like their religion, and then they just try to follow it in the best way they can, if that makes sense. Like, I guess when I have an idea of a virtuous woman, I think of someone who's just devout to God. Like, you could be a virtuous man, in my opinion. Like, you're just devout to whoever you believe in. I have
Well,
never really thought of like, I try not to put clothing and stuff on it, because I'm like, that varies from person to person. Because you can be virtuous and wear a crop top, or you could be virtuous and wear a button down. It depends on the occasion in the afternoon. I don't know. That's just my take on it.
Yeah. And in that same vein, I think we have different standards of morality everywhere. Something that's acceptable in the US is not acceptable in like the Middle East, like for example. So these like standards of morality and dressing and are not as standard as like matters of the heart, if that makes sense. Because somebody can be a SLUT and be the kindest person that you've ever met. And in that same vein, the person from church that everybody looks up to is a massive headache.
I just want to know what does virtue mean?
oh, we can look it up, but let me give you the Bible version of a virtuous woman.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to Proverbs 31, in fact, let's just jump to verse 10. The very first thing that it says that she is hard to find, and she is worth far more than diamonds. It's a woman that her husband trusts her without reserve and never has reason to regret it. She's never spiteful. She treats everyone generously all her life. She shops around for the best yarns and cottons and enjoy knitting and sewing. And she likes a trading ship that sells to so far away places and bring back exotic surprises. So in other words, that's a woman who is hard to find, who can be trustworthy. It's also a woman who knows how to spend her money and spend it wisely and always find a way to bring things back home. When you continue to read, she wakes up very early in the morning, prepare breakfast for the family, organize the day, look over what needs to be done and get it done, and take care of everything else in the household and so forth. She is highly skilled and crafts at home, and she's diligent in homemaking. She's always quick to assist anyone in need. She reach out to the poor. She doesn't worry about her family when it snows because she already prepared for the winter. She has clothes for them to wear and things like that. I mean, and goes on and on and on. Basically, it's a woman who not only she's a wife, she's also the perfect wife. She's also the perfect mother, or should I say, um, she
Homemaker.
takes care of her household. Okay. And the Bible says a woman like that is hard to find. At the end, she says she gives her everything she deserves, and her life is full of praise. So that's the Bible definition of a virtuous woman.
So I didn't say, okay, so that's interesting because there's two parts to that. Because in none of that did it say anything about her character outside of that. And also, it never mentioned anything about how she was dressed. Right. And so that's one. Two, I said, what are virtues? And so virtues are things that are different to different people. Right. At this point. So that was the biblical explanation.
Mhm.
But my virtues may be different than yours. So the idea that we have kind of put this label on what is a virtuous woman, and in no way have we said what we think a virtuous man is or how a man dress, is very interesting to me. So that's why I said I wanted to listen
Mhm.
before I spoke, because I think we ourselves are putting our own like morality on people, and we are all judging people based off of how they are dressed and not the content of their character or even what comes out of their mouth, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So, and so for me, if you're wearing a crop top, it's so different than wearing a two-piece bathing suit at the beach. Do I think you should wear a two-piece bathing suit in a church? No, but if I'm at a church function and it's a beach outing, then that's very different. But you're going to have people that are going to have a problem with somebody wearing a two-piece bathing suit at a beach outing because it's never enough, because they have been instilled or they're putting their own morality on someone. For instance, Cynthia is the first lady of her church. If they had a church picnic and maybe it's 100 degrees out and she wore shorts and a tank top, not even a crop top, there are going to be people who have a problem with that, because in their minds that is not okay for a first lady to do that. But they can't explain why, they just don't like it, right? Oftentimes it so for me, while people are always going to judge, I think that we have to sit back sometimes and look at the judgment and then look at our own lives and look how many times God has given us grace, right? And how many times we have ourselves been judged, and realize like we didn't like that feeling, right? We didn't like how we were perceived. And so for me, it's a work in progress. I like how, there have been some times where I've seen something, I'm like, oh, and I catch myself, right? That's all that we're asking, is that you catch yourself so that it doesn't become a constant thing, and so that we evolve and become better human beings and be, you know what I mean? So that's my 2 cents so far.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, Katia.
I have a question for Rudy. And I get everything you said, and I agree with everything you said. Just because someone dressed certain way, we shouldn't judge them, but basically on their characters. Now, let me make it more modern. I'm a user. I mean, I don't have nothing against a Cardi B. I like her beats, to be honest. But when you have someone like Cardi B who's projecting those words, how, and then you have young girls or even young kids who listening to her songs and it depicting women a certain way. Not only Cardi, but even men. I'm making it general. But how, I don't know her personally. She may be the best person in this world. I don't know. But by the songs she puts out there, how one can, not see that her character has some type of, negativity, if that makes sense.
So, okay, I can answer that. There's two things. One, she's not making music for young kids. So you as a parent or as an adult have to, and also the version that's on the radio is not the dirty version, right? And so you as a parent have to monitor what your young kids are listening to. She is not making music for young kids. So that's one. Two, I see her as a character. It's no different than me seeing someone acting in a movie. I don't think Denzel Washington is the character from Training Day every time I see them. Artists are portraying people, they're portraying an image. It's interesting to me, and I think we can have another conversation about this, and particularly with hip hop and music that is from that we think that those people are who they are. We assume that's who they are. Kiss, Gene Simmons is not wearing that makeup all the time. We know that that's a caricature of him on the stage, right? Like Janet Jackson is a very shy person, but when she's on stage, she's a different person. And so that's an alter ego. That's not real. And so we have to disassociate and tell our kids, and we ourselves have to realize that it is a character that is playing. That's not how she talks probably in her house. That's not how she communicates apparently in her house. It's obvious because you can tell that, like, I can give you another example. I think it was someone else who was like, I don't know who 50 Cent is. I know who Curtis Jackson is. Because when he's in a boardroom or in a meeting, he's a different person. 50 Cent is a character. And so that's what I would tell anyone, that we have to realize that, like, she realized that that's what works for her. And so she's continuing to do that. But at the end of the day, the music that she makes and how she's portraying herself, it is not for young kids. And so, as parents, we have to, or adults, we have to be mindful of that and have this conversation. Like, it's so funny. I remember years ago when it was like making the band, and this one of the rappers was like rapping about a six, like the car and whatever. And Diddy was like, "You got that car?" And the guy was like, "No." And he was like, "Well, rap about what you know about. Don't make up stuff." And the guy was like, "This is the character that I chose." And so we have to realize that it's a character. It's not a real thing. So I hope that answered your question.
Mm-hmm. Pat?
Um, Woody, you said some very valuable stuff, and I think you also referenced back Cynthia that says there's a time and a place for everything, and I totally agree. And I know that we've done better with our standards, but I still also believe that when you have a platform, and you gave a great example with Cardi B, and it's definitely not for kids, and you really referenced it very well. Specifically within our Black nation, we have the ones that have a platform, we have to use it wisely. Because you have so many followers within that platform. So many of our young girls are following what you're about. And again, maybe they take people out of character or whatever, but we also have a right to educate and whatever that virtue may be, because they are going to be discriminated against later on. So we need to make kids understand that, okay, although we are becoming more liberal in our thinking, there's a time and a place. There will be in corporate America, there will be in the science world, there will be this, there will be that. And they need to be able to distinguish that. It goes back to education, it goes back to family education, it goes back to Boys and Girls Club. But that distinction of what our hip hop is portraying or what's portraying in TikTok is not necessarily the reality, because unfortunately, as much as it is about the parents, but there are a lot of kids that are putting their hands into those videos and they're not sheltered from them. So how do we deal with that to ensure that moving forward, when they become 19, 20, 21, they know the difference and they can deal with the world that we need to deal with as Black people?
Yeah, what do you want to respond?
Yeah, I mean, this false narrative that I need to be a representation for all Black people has to stop. Like, we are not a monolith. And the idea that, like, there isn't a counter to Cardi B, there's a her, there's there is Rhapsody, there are a lot of different rappers. So, you know, the idea that I have to always constantly live up to this standard because I'm representing all Black people, it's a detriment to our society. And we have to, like, really take a hard stand against that because, while we are not a majority of the population, it does us a disservice to think that we have to put on airs and be a caricature because we're worried about what white people are thinking of us, right? And so, um, you know, Cardi B can do that with her music, and if you don't like it, you can find another artist. We never say that to other counterparts to do that, and so I think that it is something that we also have to think about. That, like, again, while she is a caricature, you can find another caricature that's more in line with what you believe in, and that has just as big as a platform, or even bigger, right? Like, that talks about the things that you deem fit. There are people that are like that, but I just think that we have to be cognizant of when we even in this world today. Listen, that's the whole thing about respectability politics. Just to bring it back to the subject, right? That, like, a few years ago, you couldn't wear your hair natural at work. Why? Because some white person deemed that it wasn't professional, right? And so, and so, or you couldn't, like, speak in a certain vernacular, or you couldn't go to a certain school, or you couldn't do all of these things. And it's because, and then we followed suit because we thought that we needed to be accepted in this world to make them comfortable. And so that that should no longer be the case. Be who you are and like what you like. And yes, there's sometimes, like I said, that I will listen to Cardi B, but then there are some other times where I'll listen to somebody else. That is not the totality of who we are. We're not a monolith.
Yeah, and on top of that, to say that we might be unprepared for the world that we're growing up in, I think is unfair because rap music has been around for decades. You guys had it. Um, Men have been demeaning women for decades. I think we're all aware of the world that we live in, regardless of rap music or TikTok or anything like that. Like we still have like our reality, like it's in front of us. Um, and of course, like we're obviously not a monolith. Not everybody likes rap music. Not everybody listens to Cardi B or Megan Thee Stallion. Um, and I think like this conversation has been brought up more um, because there's female rappers again. But for like a good 10+ year period, there was maybe only Nicki Minaj and then a whole bunch of male rappers. Nobody bashed the male rappers for talking about women's bodies like that. If anything, the that they were talked about was gang culture, this, that, the third. The impact on women had no conversation. So I mean, like it's hard um to see it like when it's right in front of you, but we do get like a double standard within ourselves. Like we expect these female rappers to be here I go with the female, but we expect these girl rappers to be role models for young girls and the next generation, but we don't hold the same standard for the male rappers who have been around for decades.
Gucci Mane.
Mane, Lil Wayne, Drake, like they're not there. It's like their impact isn't talked about at all.
Yeah, and I think it's sometimes I understand for parents it might be a little scary to have people who produce provocative music, and then the idea of what if my kid decides to follow some of the things that they're saying. But parents should worry about all types of genres of music if that's the case, because you can listen to R&B, they're most likely talking about sex. You could listen to pop, they're most likely talking about sex. It's almost in like all genres, and we can't put it on, to be honest, all of our women artists to be role models. I feel like we have plenty of role models that we can look up to. We have our parents, teachers, we have a lot of people. And some of the people I listen to, some of the women, I'm like, oh yeah, she's a role model for me. Like, I think it's crazy that Megan Thee Stallion is getting a degree while she's also performing on stage and stuff. I'm like, maybe some of the things in her lyrics, of course, I'm not going to do because I'm 16. But I'm like, you know what? She got nice music. She's going to school. I can follow her. I like the stuff she's putting out. She's telling me to go vote. Like, I like that. And I do think that kids do become well aware of their race and the type of social standards, even
being held to.
Yeah, from a young age. Like, I knew the moment I got to like elementary school, middle school, oh yeah, I can't have my phone out. I can't listen to music, or I can't say certain things that I would say outside of the school because I'm in the classroom. It's my place to learn. I have to, I don't want to say act a certain way, but I put on a different type of behavior because that's what I deem as acceptable. I'm not going to scream around or yell rap music in the classroom. Like, that's not acceptable. I think, and those are things that will follow when we start working as well. I feel it's common sense to kind of know the certain behavior that you would want to put out once you go into certain situations, like a job interview. You're
Like
not going to do certain things.
Like, our only influence isn't social media.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to say though, common sense is not that common sense. What we think should be common sense, and unfortunately, there's some people that it's a lot of people that it's not common sense. I don't. I'm not. I've never been one that truly listened to rap. It's just not my thing. I listen to it a little bit, but it's never been my thing. But what I'm saying is, when you have a platform, you have more exposure, and people do use that platform for good or bad. People do listen to people with platforms. So we need to use it wisely. Woody mentioned virtuous for one another. I mean, it differs. I definitely understand that if it differs. But if you have a platform, understand that you're gonna have a lot of people looking at you, whether it's a positive platform, negative platform. People are looking at you. You have a platform, and you need to use that platform wisely.
So, but that's my point. She does. She's also a political activist, so we're not talking about that
Oh,
part.
I actually was not the one that was talking about Cardi B. I'm not using Cardi B overall. I'm saying the fact that we're saying within the show that, I understand standards and things like that, and I understand that will come a long way, but people with platform are going to influence people, whether positive or negative.
So that's what
There's a lot of people been exposed by that.
I know, but that's what we're trying. So if you want to take her out of it, what I'm saying is that if these we're making judgments on people on half of them. Look at their totality. They are using, for instance, very political and had an interview with Bernie Sanders and like did all of this stuff during the election. Meg the Stallion is in college, right? Nobody ever talks about that this girl is like a college student doing that. How many other performers or rappers do you know that about them? So that's what I'm trying to say, that we can't use one aspect of it. The other thing that I wanted to say is that we also are forgetting that people have discernment, and that's what Wendy just brought up earlier, that she knows that she can't rap in class and rap out of lyrics. And so that comes from parents. You have to teach kids discernment, and that's when we take responsibility. I know that I can be in a board meeting and I'm like, bitch better have my money. I know that I can't say that. You understand what I'm saying? And so it's not even just like common sense isn't common, it's discernment, and we all have it. We know we have it. And if we and we're putting so much on these artists that we're not taking self responsibility for our thing. The other thing that I do want to bring up, and this is the last point, Melody, you corrected yourself earlier when you said female rappers. In that context, that is correct, right? Because it's an adjective in that way. Because if you use the term female rappers and male rappers, that's okay. What the problem in using the term female is if you are saying those females over there, or you know how females be doing this, like that's the negative connotation of it. And so when it is used as an adjective, that's okay. If you say female doctor, female lawyer, and you say male doctor, male lawyer, that is okay. But when you are referring to women in general, or in specific, say this female gets on my nerves, that's when it becomes problematic and it's no longer an adjective,
Mhm.
right? And then you've reduced that person because there is a woman, there is a word for a to describe and it described a female human being, and that is woman. When we don't use that word, we've taken that kind of like what she is and reduced something else. Does that make sense? The
Yeah.
difference is that I want to make sure that you guys are different too. Oh, they're but I just wanted to make sure that we understand the difference between when you're using as an active is okay. When we're using it that's when it becomes repetitive. So sorry. Go ahead.
So far, what I'm hearing, and you guys can correct me, I'm hearing or I'm sensing that black women or black girls can decide for themselves what is right and what is wrong, and what works for them and what does not. Um, but I'm also hearing that, in a way, they're saying that they deserve to live their lives on yoke, if I could even use that word, by the Jezebelian projections. So here's the question that I have for you. This is a quote from a preacher who actually quote, um, um, I guess, a rap song and why not. And the title of his sermon, and I'm talking about Pastor Chris here, and the title of his sermon was simply this: You can't turn a hoe into a housewife. When you hear a term like that used in the church, um, I can't help it but to think about slavery all over again. I can't help it to think about the plantation, where you have the master, and then you have the black person who's in charge of the rest, and you hear that term used by a black man addressing other black people, or addressing women. What comes to mind when you hear that? Because again, I'm thinking you're using the word you can turn a hoe into a housewife. But the question I want to ask then is, who needs whom the most? Um, who needs whom the most? When you have a church, 90% of your church is it's females, right? 10% of male, and yet you make a comment like that, speaking to a bunch of young ladies, speaking to housewives. What are you really? So if you guys were sitting on the pews on that particular day, and you heard a sermon with a title like that, what are some of the thoughts that will rise up, aggressive thoughts that could rise up from within as you hear a subject matter that way?
I mean, I would feel bothered by it because God's changed people, human does not. I mean, just because that was the person past doesn't determine that's the person future or who they are. If you look in the story in the Bible, the woman who was caught in adultery, what did Jesus say? Whom without sin cast the first stone. And mind you, she had slept with all of them that was coming to Jesus, bringing her.
Mm-hmm.
So if
Mm-hmm.
Jesus can
Mm-hmm.
change someone, yeah, like it's a negative title is to put women down, because if God, Jesus himself can change the adulterous woman and make her somebody who's valued, who's, even when she came to the house, she washed her hair, she poured perfume on. That's how appreciative, because at that moment her life was changed. So for a preacher to make that comment saying you cannot, change a hoe into a housewife, that's telling me that Jesus is no longer in the business of changing hearts. So, like, as a Christian, I cannot accept that, because at the end of the day, he does change heart. And then you can change as long as you allow the process to go through Christ, but not human. People are always going to remember what you did. They will always trying to show you, because that's what the devil does. He reminds you of what you used to be, but not what you are. But at the same time, God changed you. And whenever you come to that place, you feel like, the Lord is still working with me, and then people remind you of your past, it's because, they're not where you at. Because when you have that relationship with Christ, it does not matter what people think of you, because your behavior, who you are, show that you are a different person. So
And I know you guys want to jump in on the conversation, but my biggest problem, I guess one of my biggest problem is that it's so lopsided. A statement like that is very lopsided because you automatically talking to the woman and disregard the male altogether, as if they can be hoes, as if they can act that way. To me, it's absolutely ridiculous. Go ahead.
So
Solomon.
for me, but the truth is, you guys, and I'm always the one causing trouble. The truth is that that's how people think. We know that's how people think. I think Fabiola put something about you. You know, you want a woman in public or whatever, and it's true. And it's upsetting. It's aggravating that he would honestly, and I'm not gonna lie to you, a lot of pastor priests will probably think the same way. He is the one to actually put it into a song, but a lot of people think the same way. And it's upsetting because the Bible said, "Come as you are," and we tell people, "Come as you are, don't judge." But meanwhile, and we heard it last week from Pastor Paul Anthony, and I've heard it from friends too. Is the church is one of the places that's known to be the most judgmental place that actually steer people away from who they are, and you have to put that facade when you sit in the pews. So the truth is, this is what we're thinking out there, and it's upsetting, but it is what we're thinking.
Yeah. Ladies.
In response to that, so what? Like, just because that's the current thought doesn't mean that that should be the thought. And like, we don't have to make excuses for it. It's upsetting, and so people need to stop bringing that up, or they need to start bringing men into the equation as well. Because a man that doesn't respect women is also not going to be a good husband.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I
When you teach that, when you teach men to not respect women in the church, you're already setting a dangerous precedent for all the boys. If we're going to talk about kids, for all the young men in the church, you're teaching them that they don't have to respect women. That a woman is supposed to be
like a
a
tool.
tool. It's supposed to give her everything to a man, and he does not have to do anything in return.
It's statements like that that make me so worried, because I'm just like, girls have to listen to that and the young boys listen to that, and they're gonna take two different things from it. What usually girls, when we hear statements like that, we think, oh well, now I need to make sure that I act a certain way so I'm wifeable. So I need to do all these quality. I need to have all these qualities so men will want me. So at the end of the day, I can get married, yada yada yada, still fit into this little box. But when guys hear it, they're just like, "Oh, bet! Like I can have my fun. I'm a teenager. I can do what I want, and when I want to settle down, I'm not going to take any little girl. I need myself a wife." Statements like that, I just think they're so harmful, and
Especially
it
from
has
the
no
church.
place in church. You should not say you can't turn a hoe into a housewife. You can't turn a hoe into a husband then. Like it doesn't add up. I think it's both detrimental, because I'm just like, women, even if they're okay, let's say sex positive, they deserve love and respect too. What makes you think that, okay, because a woman sells sex, that she might not want to be married? That's so unfair to her. She deserves the same level of respect you have for the first lady than you have for her. Like, there's still people.
But my question is, who they hoeing with?
Say that again.
Who they hoeing with? If you
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
The man.
so like this whole idea that like, so what, she's doing it to her, she needs a partner. Obviously the partner is other people in that church, and
Mm-hmm.
half the time those same pastors, I'm making a very generalized statement, that are saying that in the pulpit have some of those same women in that congregation are his hoes. Like, let's keep it all the way funky, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of like, Monty, you said something that was like so spot on. Most often in church, the congregation is largely women. So who is that sermon for? You're
Mm-hmm.
telling women in a church that is already following you, don't do this, and you're not addressing the real issue. You know what I mean? We act like, it's this like thing that we put on women, and especially Black women, to like uphold this facade and other stuff. And it's like, well, who are they doing it with? Why are we not talking to the
Mm-hmm.
people that
Mm-hmm.
they are doing it with? And
Mm-hmm.
so, that's what. And honestly, if I was in a church like that, I would give it one more sermon and I would leave. That's not the church for me, period,
Mm-hmm.
point blank. You know what I mean? because
Mm-hmm.
because it is like not only hypocritical, it is a dangerous precedent of how we are teaching kids or young people how they should act. It also doesn't give women ownership of who they are and their body. And Cynthia is very, very correct in the sense of saying that, like, who are you to say that someone can't change if they did display that behavior? That's why they're in that church. First of
Mm-hmm.
all, the sermon is
Mm-hmm.
off because I'm
Mm-hmm.
here because I want to be changed,
Mm-hmm.
right? And now you're attacking me and not allowing me to be able to be filled with God grace to change my behavior. So, like
And
I
you're
said,
also
one or two
limiting,
more sermons and I'm out.
and
Like,
you are limiting God in a way. You're almost saying like there are some people that God cannot save, which is ridiculous. So really, in a way, you're really saying that pimps cannot pimp and players cannot play without women to exploit, and
right.
this ridiculous fantasy or twisted fantasy that we find ourselves in. Well
Yes.
said, Pat.
Okay, so we know that the double standards have existed for centuries now, and I think Wendy mentioned, you have little boys thinking that way, and they have thought that way. We all grew up. When I was in high school, when a guy is wanted by many women, it's a stud and everybody's happy. But, God forbid, if a woman, is cheating on a man, then that's the thing. And I think my brother and I were talking about something last week
Mhm.
about a few people that we know. And I guess the husband cheated on the wife many times, and then the wife cheated on the husband, and now he sold the house, whatever, whatever. And I'm like, really?
Mhm.
But it's that, and my brother was like, yeah, I said it's that double standard, and I'm like, out of the many times she just accepted him and pardoned him, and now that's what happened. Like, she didn't get no chance at all. Everything
Mhm.
sold, house sold, everything. So I'm asking you, as a pastor, how do we? I know we have evolved in our thinking, but how do we ensure? How do we work on this? Because this has been something that's been there for a while. And to be honest with you, it will continue to be there. And I think a lot of it is unspoken. I mean, honestly, I have to give this pastor a prop for even putting it out there, because a lot of it within the church from the leaders is very unspoken. It's subtle. So, how do we address it?
Well, first of all, I would say, as one pastor to another, we need to stop what's the word, manipulating those who show up to our doors. Whether we use sermon to do it, whether we use the Bible to do it, The Bible was not written for that purpose, and it's a shame that we pull our Bible text and we use certain things, certain words to push our agenda. And for me, when I listen, when I hear something like that, I'm saying that this is not an accidental phrase. This is something that is systematic, that he knows what he's trying to accomplish. At the end of the day, I want you to always remember that as pastors have a lot of power in the church, and people look up to them and such a way. So when you're in a position of leadership and you make statement like that, you are truly evangelizing. I'm going to use that word, the minds of those who are listening to you, and you are there goes again. You are slut shaming them for something that they're not even doing, without without making sure that you are holding the man accountable just as much as you trying to hold the females accountable. um but to answer your question, Pat, unfortunately I have to say the world that we are living in, it's listen, God, the Bible says God's kingdom is not of this world, right? And we must break our hearts away from loyalty to any system, any system that is created by men, whether it's a church, whether it's politics, whether it's religion or whatever. At the end of the day, people are selfish. They're going to do what's best for them. And when you have a society predominantly that is, and I'm saying this as a man, okay, predominantly the men are in charge, they're going to create laws. They're going to create laws in such a way that benefits them the most. And it's even worse in the black community. Okay. Um, Something as simple as, and we mentioned that in this program before, when a woman get raped, a black woman get raped is different than a white woman get raped. When a black woman get raped, the question is, what kind of woman was she? What was she wearing that day? You know, how was she talking? I mean, they ask all of those other questions before they can even look at what happened to her. But when a white woman, for example, get raped, it's a different ball game. She doesn't have to go. So it's like there
But
is double standard.
he
Go
gets
ahead.
asked those. She does get asked those questions, but there is a different kind of standard. And so let's be clear. I want us to be kind of clear about it. White women do, you're right in the sense that it is treated differently, but because Black women and girls have been sexualized
Correct.
since they were younger, and
Yep.
seem like they are able to, like they want it because of, things that we can't even control, like the development of our body, right? And so like oftentimes, I remember when I was younger, I got breasts earlier. I couldn't control that, but people seeing that just turned me from a little girl to a sexualized person, right? And so where we even with little white girls are given more of a pass. A lot of times they're given, you know um an opportunity to figure that out oftentimes, whereas Black women, we don't have that luxury because it's also happening in our community most often, right? Like it was like, if she can this, then she can that, that kind of mindset, right? And so I just wanted to make that clarification because
Yeah.
it made off a little kind of not
I think
insensitive.
I think where I was trying to go with that is, historically, when you look at in the annals of human history, right? Laws were always put in place to protect white female sexuality,
100%.
right? Whether it's chastity and white owned property, but not for black women. So
Right.
it's a different standard. It's really different standard. When you see a black woman, it's almost like, well, sexual promiscuity.
Well, even when even when slave plantation owners raped Black women,
Yeah,
right? It was
yeah,
fault of the Black women, even though they had no choice in the matter. They were raped and they were beaten, and then they had to work. That was still put on them. And so, by Black men and the white women who were upset that their husbands were sneaking off and having a sexual relationship with Black women. You know what I mean? So, like,
Hmm.
always been the fault of Black women, even when they had no control over it. So it's like, it's a thing, like, it, you know, um, a Black woman would be raped and her counterpart would be upset with her because she was raped. You know what I mean? So she was
Hmm.
betrayed
Hmm.
by not only, and then the white women would have vitriol against her again for being raped. So that's why when we say protect Black women, that's because in society she's never been protected. She always had to stand on a ledge by herself because the intimidation sometimes that white women have felt for them, and also because they no one had their back. And so that's why now you see this movement of protect Black women. It's because people are finally catching up and they realize how much value you bring to it. Listen, we can bring it full circle. Like we talked about Cardi B. There were a lot of people who were Bernie Sanders supporters who wasn't going to vote for Joe Biden. Guess who had to vote for Joe Biden? Cardi B. We look at what Stacey Abrams just did in Georgia. We look at what Keisha Lance Bottom has done. We look at Alicia Razor and what she has done with the Black Lives Movement. We look at Tamika Mallory and Until Freedom. These are Black women who are in the forefront, who are again saving us, right? And so we have to give, at this point, we have to give these women the just due and stop with the respectability politics. Because what? While Tamika's dead, she's probably dropping a hot somewhere, right? At a party. Oh, because she can do that. We can have dualities. We can have fun. We can dress a certain kind of way, but we can also command attention and respect in a boardroom.
I agree. Melody?
So I think like we were talking about before, there's obviously a long history of abusing Black women, and then blaming them for their abuse. And I think the church, especially because it's such an important sector of like the Black community, we have a responsibility to our Black girls to um, stop with the social norms of slut shaming them in childhood, especially
Hmm.
because they are brought up believe that they are at fault for whatever happens to them.
Hmm.
It's literally social to them, and it's stated to protect them, but it does more bad than good because alongside of it, men and boys are watching that happen, and they're able to take advantage of that
Hmm.
all
I
the time,
agree.
and then they become abusers, and then the cycle repeats.
I think people just need to change their thinking. If you want to change your thinking, you will. Because growing up, I think just due to what I heard, I was just like, oh yeah, like if someone dresses this way, then of course, like if something happens to them, it might be their fault. And then I got catcalled when I just came home from my swim club. I looked terrible. I was just walking in t-shirt and jeans, and adults were catcalling me, and I was just like, something's not right.
Yeah,
Like
there's a disconnect.
there's a disconnect in my thinking. So I had to actively change that. I'm just like, no, everyone should be respected no matter what they're doing. It's their lives. If they're not harming anyone, who's to say that, okay, because she might sleep, okay, like for prostitutes, I listen to a lot of true crime stuff. So a lot of the time when a prostitute is sexually assaulted or murdered, the police do nothing. They don't even bat an eye. They're just like, well, we just got another person off the street. That's so terrible. We have to change how our society views women and their bodies and how women choose to use their bodies. We shouldn't villainize anyone for, even if they, well, you're like, okay, well, I want to be celibate. We shouldn't villainize them, and we shouldn't villainize, okay, well, I'm sex positive. I want to, have sex with people. Both of those things, people should be able to respect
It's a
and mind
personal
their
choice.
business. Like, if it doesn't involve you, mouth shut.
And like she was talking about prostitutes, I just want to say, like, how is it not how, but why is it easier to see women who we don't deem as quote unquote respectable, um like why is it easier for us to say that they deserve to be mistreated rather than hold abusers accountable?
Right.
And I think it goes back to, I think we've all been saying the same thing, that the mindset. And like I said, and believe it or not, we've come a long way. Do we still have a long way to go? Yes, we do. We have a long way to go, but we've come a long way. It's the way we were taught. It's the way, they put where they put the emphasis. So I agree. It doesn't matter who you are, what you do. Everybody should be respected. I think Wendy mentioned something about when a prostitute is killed, they're also in line that you're into, that unfortunately the cops don't take as seriously as they should, and that should not be the case. It shouldn't be the case, but it is. It is. Are we seeing some changes? I think we are, but we have to continuously bring the awareness to that, because that's not how things were. But we have evolved. The fact that we've been talking about it is a positive, and we have evolved. We just need to continue to bring awareness to this. But there is major discrepancy.
And we also have to stop being our worst enemy, if I could use that. Um, you know, even when I look at again the platform earlier, we were talking about the platform that we use and make sure that we use it wisely. I believe pastors have a tremendous responsibility to use their platform wisely. We are living in a world where it's hard enough for the black community. They have to deal with so much. I remember there used to be a time where the killing of a young black child was really frowned upon. But when you begin to see it so much, whether you see it on television or whether you see it in the movies, something inside of you begins to change. And we have to be careful what we allow in to desensitize us to those things. We have to be careful about, I mean, when you look at the educational system, you look at the prison system, how everything is intertwined, and black folks are marginalized, and there are the limit put to prevent us from thriving. And then you come to church, a place where you're supposed to feel to be resurrected, to be recharged, to be filled, so that you can go and deal with all those nonsense that's going on in the world, and then you get destroyed even more by someone that supposed to be connected to God. So we, like you say, Pat and Woody and the rest of you, we all have a part to play. We all um, um, have to be mindful about what we say. I mean, even right here on the program, I made a statement earlier, and Woody quickly went, "No, not quite this way." That's what I'm talking about. Sometimes we say things and we mean well, we really do, but in the statement at that particular time, something that you said does not resonate properly, and we have to have people that care enough about us that we can hold each other accountable,
Yes.
so that we don't do more harm, so that we don't become our worst enemy.
Agreed. And to add to that, and Monday, Woody, I think the whole team have been saying the same thing, is for people like myself, we've been programmed. When I see the twins, and my kids, like I said, are
Stop
21,
calling
22.
them twins. Stop calling them
My
twins.
beautiful twins, my beautiful little cousins, when I see them, and just the positivity, and when I see my kids 21, 22, the positivity, how they see the world, it's enlightening. It's very enlightening. It's refreshing. And people like myself that's been programmed, I have to check myself all the time. And I even check myself through my kids. Like I said yesterday, I called my daughter, I was like, okay, this and this and this, because I know that my programming was different. My programming was different. I have to constantly reflect back and we need to do that on an individual level, because changes can't be made if you think you're perfect or you think you're doing it right when the whole world doesn't think so. So I constantly have to check myself and constantly saying, okay, am I thinking about this the right way? Because I was raised this way. You know, where does that line? Is there a line? Should there be a line? Because at the end of the day, we need to understand the evolution needs to occur. We need to get better. We need to empower our kids. And I constantly say it to education, as Monday mentioned, but education comes in different form. I'm not necessarily talking about formal education. Formal education is great, but there's different way of educating, of bringing things to the surface. And people of platform as well need to ensure that that surface is clear to them. You don't have to accept everything. There are some things that you can tell your congregation, you know what, although I'm not 100% about it, but I am talking about it. And people like that. You don't have to be like, oh my God, I'm power everything. I see everything. You know, I don't see any judgment in anything. And I'll be lying if I say I don't see, you know, I don't have any judgment in anything. Or, you know, there are some things that I'm like, you know what, I understand it should be this way, but for me, this is the way I choose to see it, and I need to work on it. But at the end of the day, you need to have that self-reflection so you can eventually come together as a group and move us forward.
Woody?
So,
and Woody checks us all the time.
Yeah, I listen. I have to say that, you know, I had a conversation with Mello last night, and I was like, when I was like in college, you know, there was like people used to call me the militant one. You know what I mean? So this is the very like old and tired version of the militant one. And so, but what I want to say is this, kind of bringing it a little back full circle. There's this one pastor, or a deacon in my church. Is she a deacon or a minister? I can't remember. One of the reasons why she's my favorite is she's like, oh, when I was younger, I used to hoe around, but God worked on me. And if these young hoes would go to the old hoes and just have a conversation and see how God has changed your life, then and what I loved is that like how honest she is, right? Like it's not about it's about her showing the change in her. And
Yeah.
so I say that to say, and to show her walk, right? Which is what we need to see. I think oftentimes we see people who are pious in the pulpit or act like they've never done anything and that they've been saved since the day that they, you know, came to the earth. And so all of that to say is that when it comes to the respectability politics and how we think about Black women, just when you see something, whether it's on TikTok or Instagram or someone walking down the street or whatever, just pause a minute. That's all that we're asking you to do. Just take a minute and think about whatever judgment you may have, because we don't know where that person is at that moment in their life. And we also don't know, we don't know where they are, and we don't know what God is working on them, right? And so as I would hate for someone to judge me for a 15-second or 13-second version of me, let's pause and do that ourselves when we are looking at people, and particularly young Black girls. Allow them to make mistakes so that they can become fully human. I'm not saying don't correct them. We can pull them aside if we know them and have a conversation with them and say, maybe don't do this, maybe be better, but let's give them the same grace that we are asking from God daily. So that was the last thing I wanted to say.
Well said, well said. And with this, Fabiola also said that we as people, we are followers and we are influenced by others. But at the end of the day, she said a platform can be used negatively or positively. You as individual, just as you were saying, Moody and Pat, you as an individual, you need to decide which direction you want to portray. Well said. Listen, I want to thank everyone, the members of the panel, um, and also those who watched the program today: Fabiola, Sister Doa, Mr. Stan, Kevin, and Marie, and those who are watching on YouTube. I don't have the names here. and also those who are working behind the scene, like Sister Kate, to make sure that the programs get to as many people as possible. I just want to take a moment to say I appreciate each and every one of you, and I thank you for being part of the program today. We do have a birthday to celebrate. Vincent, who is Luby's husband, is having a birthday today, so we want to give a shout out to him and tell him happy birthday, Vincent.
Wait, and Kel's
And
birthday.
we also have Nia tomorrow and Markel, I think the 17th or something like that.
Yeah, but that's for next week.
Next week. Okay.
Yeah, his birthday's on the 19th.
19th.
Yeah.
But 3 days.
Yeah,
Well, we have Nia's birthday tomorrow. So happy birthday, Nia.
there you go. Woody?
No, I was going to say Markel's birthday is on the 19th. So wish
Correct.
him a happy birthday before the.
Correct. Oh yeah, we can actually do it before his birthday, but I usually wait on that Saturday that week to wish him happy birthday. So happy birthday, Markel, and to everybody else who's having birthdays. Thank you, ladies. Thank you so much. Let's have a word of prayer before we go. Father God, we have said so much, but there is still so much that needs to be said. We just ask that you will give us your Holy Spirit to continue to enable us to decipher what is truth, to decipher what is right, so that we can live a life that is pleasing to you. We thank you for today's program. We thank you for those who are able to watch us and participate in the discussion. Let your name be praised in all that we do. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, family. I love you. Have a wonderful
Thank
evening.
you.
See you guys next
Happy
time.
Martin Luther weekend.
Bye.
Luther